Hello and welcome to Rays of Hope. My name is Amy Clevitants and I'll be your host for today's show. The mission of the Kentucky Association of Children's Advocacy Center is to provide a coordinated response to victims of child sexual abuse by providing assistance and offering promotion of the 15 child advocacy centers operating here within our Commonwealth. All 15 centers have a dedicated response to children, and the Purchase Area Sexual Assault and Child Advocacy Center is very honored to have the opportunity to serve child victims within the primary 8 counties of the Purchase area. Joining me here today to speak about child sexual abuse throughout the Commonwealth is Megan Wright. Megan is the state coordinator with the Kentucky Association of Children's Advocacy Centers. Megan, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to start out today by kind of defining what child sexual abuse is. I find when I speak to members of our community, there seems to be some confusion about what constitutes abuse. So can you tell me, how is child sexual abuse defined within our Commonwealth?
It's engaging in any behavior, whether that's looking, touching, or displaying, in which the abuser is using a child to meet their sexual needs. That abuser can be an adult or it can be another child, but it's anybody who has taken on a role or is in a position of authority or power over a child that exploits the child for their sexual needs and their desires. And so it's anything from voyeurism and exhibitionism to showing or creating pornography that involves a child, to long-term contact that is sexual in nature with a child.
And how many children nationwide will become a victim of child sexual abuse before their 18th birthday?
1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused before their 18th birthday, and it's more than physical contact. Obviously, that includes all of those things that we just talked about. 70% of all sexual assaults that are reported have victims that are the age of 17 or under. So that leads us to know that there's over 39 million victims of child sexual abuse living in the United States.
And who are the perpetrators? Is there a typical profile of a sex offender?
I think we like to think that what mainstream media has shown us and what we see on TV is what a sex offender is. I think it's easier for us to believe that it's the stranger or it's the creepy person leaking in the alley, and that's just not really the case. The majority of the time, it is someone that the child and the child's parents know. It's anybody from a coach to a teacher to a clergy member to someone within the family. And 60% of people who abuse children were known by the family of the child that they abused. 30 to 40% of children are abused by someone within their own family, and 90% of the time, the child knows their abuser.
I've read a study recently that said that 85% of adults surveyed who were molested as a child never disclosed that abuse during their childhood. Why is it that children don't disclose? I think parents typically are surprised by that because they tell their children to tell, but yet so many don't. Why is that?
I think sometimes it has to do with what the parents tell their children to tell. You know, tell me if a stranger talks to you or if somebody makes you feel uncomfortable. And I think we have to go a step further. But I think it's a lot of what the abuser does as well. It's the abuser shaming the child. It's the abuser placing that blame in the child's hands, saying, well, you agreed to it, or, you know, you let this happen. Sometimes it's intimidation. It's a threat of physical harm. Maybe it is the fear that something will happen, something will change, whether it's, daddy is going to get taken away, or I'm going to be taken out of my home, or maybe somebody threatens that child or their family. And so there's a lot of factors that play into that intimidation that just kind of contribute to the power and control that an abuser has over the child that they're abusing. And so we have to keep those factors in mind. They lead to a lot of other symptoms for the child, whether that's fear or shame, and those all contribute to why a child wouldn't disclose abuse.
Sometimes in the media you hear about the grooming process, and we know that child sexual abuse isn't just a spontaneous act. There is a process to it. Children are coerced into a sexual relationship, and then they're almost coerced into secrecy. So can you talk a little bit about that grooming process?
That grooming process is something we do see with long-term abuse situations. And so we see that grooming process take place, and it starts in little steps. It may be in compliments, it may be in special attention or favors shown towards a child, and it leads up to sexual contact. it is that process of gaining the child's trust and putting them in a vulnerable position. And we have to remember that our children are already a vulnerable population. It gets the child to the point that they're able to be isolated, and when they're isolated, they're able to abuse the child. An abuser is able to abuse the child, but they're also able to keep the child quiet. The child, once they're isolated off, they're able to manipulate them and to make them afraid of telling. And I think they corner them off from the people that they would tell.
So if our children aren't telling, then how is it that we discover instances of abuse? Are there warning signs that a child may be being abused?
There is. There's lots of different signs, and no one sign necessarily means that a child is being abused. But you may see signs emotionally or physically or even developmentally. It could be anything from long-term bedwetting after a child is of that age. It could be fear of displays of affection, even appropriate ones. It could be a child, typically think about our children being independent and going through those independent phases. It could be a child's doubt in their ability to take care of themselves. It could be nightmares and night terrors, a child that startles easily, or one that's afraid of abandonment at an inappropriate age. That we're not talking about an infant who gets upset when their parent drops them off at preschool, but we're talking about an 8-year-old that doesn't want to be left alone. And grandma and grandpa's, that's something we need to be paying attention to. That's something that needs to be a warning sign where we're saying, okay, why is my child uncomfortable? This is a situation where I think they should be comfortable. And I think it opens those opportunities for discourse.
Maybe we have a viewer today that suspects a child that they know is being abused. What should they do?
They should either contact the Purchase Area Sexual Assault and Child Advocacy Center, and that number is 270-534-4422, or contact the Kentucky Child Protection Hotline, and that number is 877-KY-SAFE-1, and that translates to 877-597-2331. And what you'll do is you make an initial report. And it doesn't have to be your child. It could be a child that is friends with your child at school. It could be a next door neighbor. It could be a niece or a nephew. It's any child that you suspect.
There is an organization dedicated to prevention of abuse called Stop It Now. And Stop It Now just had a recent survey where they telephoned a number of people across the nation and just asked to talk about child sexual abuse. And one of the things they asked was whether or not they had ever suspected a child they knew had been abused and whether they followed through on that hankering. 22% of the respondents who had suspected abuse in a child said they did not follow through and file a report. And I think a lot of people are afraid to trust their instincts, or maybe they feel like they don't have proof. Do you have to have proof before you call? And what happens with DCBS after a report is filed?
Absolutely not. You do not have to have proof to make a call. Any reasonable suspicion of any kind of abuse needs to be reported. And I think the best thing to tell people is that they should err on the side of caution and remember that no matter what happens with the outcome of a report that they make, that they took steps to ensure the protection of the child. If the child was not being abused, then that's great and that's wonderful, but we're glad that they took steps to make sure that that child was being protected. And if they are being abused and they have reported it, then we applaud them for taking that step and doing that with boldness. What happens is that DCBS will start a file with any report, and from there they'll open an investigation. And I think a lot of people have again, that kind of mainstream media idea about what DCBS is. DCBS works for the Office of Protection and Permanency. Their goal is to keep children in their homes. Their goal is not to take people's children. I think those are the cases we hear about. We don't hear about all the instances where they're able to take steps for advocacy and for resources to keep children with their families. But their first priority is protection of the child. So once that case is opened, they'll start their investigation, and it'll work itself out from there depending on evidence that's found. They'll also be able to get the child to specialized treatment and care, whether that services at KACAC or whether that's somewhere else. They will get them the specialized care and attention they need to find if the allegations are founded, but also to treat the effects of it.
And I guess the million-dollar question I have for you today, what can we as a community do to keep our children safe?
There's a group called Darkness to Light, and they talk about the 7 steps to protecting our children. And the first step is to learn the facts and to understand the risk, to empower yourself with education. It's knowing the reality versus the myth. And when we understand the reality of this, we're able to use those truths that we know in order to make informed decisions about the care and protection of our children. And I think that that will help you influence the choices you make for your child. Minimizing opportunity is step 2. And anytime you can minimize one-on-one contact with one child and one adult, you're going to eliminate the risk. If there's other people around, it's a high-risk situation for an abuser, and they're less likely to abuse a child. Number 3 is to talk about it. Be open with your children, not just after you think something has happened, but before. Let them know that they can go to you with anything, anytime that they feel uncomfortable about a situation. I think empowering our children to talk about those things, empowering our children to say no, and not just no because there's a stranger that comes near them, but no because they don't want to give their aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa a hug goodbye. You teach them to be respectful, but we don't want to force them to have displays of affection that they're not comfortable with. And I think empowering them to say no in any situation with any person really helps them to be able to trust their own ability to come to their parents or to somebody else when something is making them uncomfortable. Stay alert. Don't expect obvious signs. Know your child, know their behavior, know their development, know what makes them tick, enough to know when something's different, enough to know when something is amiss. Make a plan and outline that plan with your child. Don't just have a fire safety plan like we do so many times in our homes, and the 2 adults know about it, but the children don't. This is something you talk about over and over, and you practice, and you ask the questions, and you're not afraid to have the conversations where you say, what do you do if somebody makes you feel uncomfortable? And you ask your child over and over again to make sure that you think that they would come to you, and know that they may not. And I think that's one of the hardest things is we expect our kids to come to us. And I think that's what, we go back to staying alert, knowing our kids enough to know when we need to be asking those questions. But also when you make your plan, you're knowing how to react even if it's not your child. You're knowing how to react when your child comes home and says that the person that they sit next to every day at school has bruises on them, or somebody says that their uncle is touching them, or the kids that are over at your house. You may have a child disclosed to you that's not your own, but if you have the plan and you have the resources and you know what they are and you know the steps to take beforehand, you're going to be much more equipped to deal with that situation and to deal with it in a way that's appropriate. I think we can talk a lot about, and it could be a whole other segment, about why kids kind of go back on things that they've said when they disclose. And I think one of the biggest reasons is the reaction that happens. They may see that it makes mommy or daddy sad when it comes out, or they may see that mom is devastated to the point that she can't even handle taking care of me, and it's something I've done because I told. And so when you have that plan and you know what steps you're gonna take, you're able to be the parent for your child, and you're able to be that responsible adult that can provide the care for them and seek the care for yourself without making the child feel more vulnerable. Number 6 is to act on suspicions. Anytime you suspect abuse, whether it's your child or the kid across the street or somebody on your kid's baseball team, you're reporting. You're making a phone call, and don't settle for just having a suspicion. That's not the way to go. I think one of the really neat things about the state of Kentucky is if you file a report and it becomes unfounded, which means they don't find enough evidence to support the report, you are not going to get in any trouble. And you can make any report anonymously that you want to as well. You do not have to give your name or any identifying characteristics about yourself when you report abuse of any child. Number 7 is get involved. And I think this is such a good step because not only does it give you outlets for that information, it gives you opportunities to open the conversations. And these are conversations that we talk about a lot in our field, but in the public we don't want to talk about, we don't want to hear about, and it gives you those natural opportunities. you're also going to be able to help children. I think if you volunteer with an organization like KACAC in this area, then you're going to be able to feel like you're doing something to help to combat this very pervasive problem that affects so many of our children. And you're going to be able to empower yourself, because the more you know, the more you're going to be able to do if something ever does happen.
Is there anything else that we should know?
I really can't stress enough the need and just the greatness of being able to empower yourself. And I think one of the greatest ways we can empower ourselves as adults is with information. And I think so many times in our society in general, we have a blame the victim mentality, but it's one of those things that we shouldn't be blaming the victim in any crime, but we shouldn't be blaming our children. We don't need to hold our children responsible for reporting. We don't need to hold our children responsible for the things that happen to them. And I think the more that we know, and even knowing more about our children, we're going to be able to be their best advocates. And I think that's what we're called to do as parents and as adults in the community, is to be the advocates and the protectors of our children. And so I think there's a lot of information you should know. I think talking about the fact that, most perpetrators are not even reported until they have 12 or more victims if they're a serial perpetrator. And that doesn't mean they're prosecuted after 12 victims. It means that's the first time somebody says something. And serial rapists and abusers can have as many as 400 victims in their lifetime. Those are scary statistics, and we want to say that's not the person next door, but they don't look like a person with a hood in a dark alley. They look like someone that lives next door to us, that's someone that sits in the row behind us at church, that's someone that's on the PTA with us. And many times they're going to make themselves appear more trustworthy, because that's going to allow them to isolate a child.
Megan, what are the long-term impacts of abuse for a child?
It's different with every victim. Children are very resilient. They're much more resilient than we are sometimes, but there are long-term impacts, and there are things that can come up where a child may not necessarily need intensive counseling for a long period of time as a child, but when they hit puberty, or when they hit college years, or they get married, they may need help again. And I think there's lots of different things, and we can't make our children or any victim a cookie cutter, but they're definitely more prone to depression, post-traumatic stress, suicide, self-harming behaviors, drug and alcohol abuse, eating disorders. Those are all going to be more prevalent at a greater percentage than with the general population. When you're talking about a population that's been victimized many times over a long period of time. And so if you think about someone being abused over a long period of time, it's going to take a long period of time for them to heal from it. And I think we can't put expectations, the same way we can't make them cookie cutters. We can't put expectations on our children that are victimized, and we can't say, when are they going to be over it? It's not something you get over, it's something that you cope with. And I think that just stressing that over and over again, because we don't want to expect our kids to get over it. And these are tough conversations, but I think that's where you have those community resources where you can ask those questions, where you don't want to ask your child that. If you don't think it's appropriate, don't ask them, but ask somebody. Be an informed parent, and there's so many great resources out there locally, nationally, definitely on the web. And I think that understanding what the long-term effects are and can be is going to help you in supporting any victim, whether or not it's your own child, or whether or not it's your spouse or your roommate, or whatever that may be.
Megan, let's talk about KACAC just a little bit and the services that you offer. I think we've talked a lot about those forensic services, and they're the place that the children go once abuse is suspected or discovered. But what comprehensive services are provided by the 15 centers that you represent?
Now, I do want to stress the 15 centers provide services. I do not see clients, but our 15 centers provide both, like you talked about, the forensic services, where specialized interviews for the purposes of prosecution of crimes, but also the medical exams, and that is not just for the collection of evidence, but also for medical treatment for physical effects of abuse. But most of our centers offer a variety of advocacy and support services. And so that could be long-term therapy, it could be referrals for therapy, it's going to include court advocacy, also resources for families in linking up with advocates at the prosecutor's office and working interconnectedly with the DCBS agents. And so one of our models that we promote and we work within is the model of the multidisciplinary team. And that focuses not just on prosecution by including all the players that need to be involved, such as DCBS, the prosecutor, law enforcement, advocates, therapists, maybe people from the school. It also looks at the long-term healing and the long-term care of the child that has been abused.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Megan, for being with us today and for giving us some background on the association. I encourage you, our viewers, to get involved. I know that discussions about child sexual abuse, they're not easily had, and that's why KACAC is here for you. We're here for members of the community to help you in the prevention aspect. We believe at KACAC there is hope in prevention of child sexual abuse. We're also here for you if you find yourself a parent or a caregiver of a child who's been victimized. We offer a comprehensive array of services, from the forensic interviews and the advocacy services that Megan has described here today, right through the long comprehensive care. It doesn't matter if you've been victimized 2 days ago or 20 years ago. The services at KACAC are available to you. And again, there are a number of ways that you can engage with us. You've heard 2 prevention organizations mentioned to you in today's show, and they're Stop It Now and Darkness to Light, and both offer amazing resources on how you as a community member can get involved in the fight against child sexual abuse. KACAC is available as a facilitator of information. We can provide education in the classroom. So if you work for an education environment, then please encourage your administrators to bring programming to your students. It's free of charge, and it's something that we have trained educators available to do. We also provide outreach in the community, whether it be civic organizations or church groups. We provide all the education necessary to get your members talking, to help broach this difficult subject and start talking about abuse and what we as a community can do to come together and stop these senseless acts. Child sexual abuse is a crime that is 100% preventable. It's a public health problem. It plagues far too many of our children. To get involved, you simply need to engage. Please give us a call and let us know how you can engage with us. You can reach us at the center at 270-534-4422. Again, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to working with you as a partner in prevention.